24-hour business plan.
Welcome to the 24-Hour Business Plan podcast channel. And in today's episode, what we're going to have a look at is what really should go into a market context. I often talk about the fact that there's no point doing a strategy unless you understand the world that you're living in. And that world changes all the time, whether that be your customer base, whether that be those macro trends, the industry trends. So we really need to understand that. And there are many different types of market context exercises that you can do. And what I want to talk about today is which ones of those we feel are the strongest ones to look at. The first thing you absolutely need to look at is what the size of the prize is. How big is the industry that you're in? We recently worked with a big architectural firm, and we were talking about what size the market is, and I quickly looked it up on one of those IBIS reports. And we discovered that even though they were quite a large organisation, they were only about 0.5% of the market. So there was clearly some huge upside. Conversely, we worked with somebody in Africa recently who had 25% of the market. Now, 25% of, a $4 to $5 billion market, you only might need 3% more, and that's a huge number. So understanding where you're at from a context point of view in terms of the market size is really important. You can frame your business around that. And even if you're entering into markets that are similar to yours, that are just, the next step across, same sort of thing, need to understand the size of the prize. The next thing is those industry trends. Understanding, are there some tailwinds? Are there some headwinds? Which ones of the industry trends is your whole industry growing? Because you might have a 10% share and the whole industry is growing 10, 15, 20% a year, like the technology world has done over previous years. And all of a sudden you might just go for the ride. You might decide, let's just maintain our 10%, but we're going to get a natural uplift as we go. The other thing is, you need to have a look at some of those macro trends. Things like the political environment can change those. For example, post-COVID, Australia decided to, unlock the immigration doors, and we obviously couldn't have many people coming into Australia during COVID. All of a sudden, in the first 2 years afterwards, 1 million new migrants came into Australia. Now, that's 4% of the population. So are you, again, did your business in that time grow at 4%? Because that's how many more customers were out there. One of the things we like doing in that macro analysis is to look at what we call a PESTLE model. It's a well-known model a lot of the universities use. And the P is for political. What are those political changes? What's the focus of the governments in your state or federally? The economic is clearly one of those trends. Where's unemployment? Where's inflation? Where's wage price index? Where's petrol prices, energy prices, house prices, you name it. You need to understand all of that, and is it relevant to your organisation? The S is for socio-cultural. Some of those trends can be things like post-COVID. A lot more people wanted to continue working from home. That's a trend that's stayed there. And again, how does that affect your organisation? Would you rather have your people back at the office? Are they going to be more productive back at the office, or can they just be as productive working from home and you can attract better talent doing that? The T is for technology. AI is absolutely everywhere over the last few years, and you need to understand can that play a role in your organization? Is that a game changer for you or not? Or is everyone else going to do it in your category? So PEST, the L is for legal. That's a lot of legislative things that might come through from governments. They might, mandate that certain industries have to do things a certain way, and that might change and add costs to your business. Just like the E is environmental, and in Australia, they brought in mandatory carbon reporting, and the big companies have to go first in doing that. But all of a sudden, that is something else that you need to consider as part of your business. So it's called the PESTLE model, PESTLE. The other thing you do need to understand is where your customers or your clients or your consumers are at. Have they changed? Are they showing signs of being different? Not just in the past. You really need to unpack, what are they going to be like in the next 3 years? Are they still going to need the same things from you as an organization, or are you going to need to offer something different? And I'm going to come back a little bit to our clients and customers in a minute. The next piece that I really like to dig deep on with a client as part of the context and understanding that macro environment is, what's the DNA of an organization? And by that I mean, what's the really deep history lesson as to why that business was started, why it's been successful over time? Now, what people tend to do on their websites is write a very rational story. The company was started in 1973 by two brothers. In 1984, the first female CEO was put into the company. In 2001, we merged with this company. And there really isn't much depth to that. What I'm looking for is what's really behind why that company started. We worked with a company recently. The founder the company was 17 years old. And the founder, I said, just tell us the story. Go back 17 years ago when you first set the business up, it was just you. What was that all about? Why did you set it up? And he told this incredible, quite emotional story. And one of his staff members, who was his first ever staff member, who joined 4 weeks later, she said, I never knew that. That's amazing. That makes me want to work here even more. So understanding what those drivers are, and sometimes it might mean, you might really realize that this company at its heart was entrepreneurial, but over time has lost a bit of that entrepreneurship. But you know what? To be successful, we could bring that back a little bit. That was part of our DNA. Then it's important to understand who your customers are. Do a bit of analysis of what they're doing, what they're offering. Why are they winning some customers over you? Is it pricing? Is it relationships? Is it some other reasons? Is it their core offer is better? So you need to unpack some of your competitors and then truly understand why you're different. And that's a really hard thing to do. It's really easy to say, we think we're different because of X, Y, Z. You've got to have a good, long, hard look in the mirror and say, is that truly a differentiator? So they're all the things that we like to cover off in a market context. And I'm just going to come back to the customer piece because that's really important. Some people say, how much information do I need to have on my customers, on my clients, on my consumers? And the answer is going to be a bit weird. It does depend. But again, you can almost sometimes have too much information and on other times you have too little information. So I think you really want to understand what are those customer needs. That's the critical thing. Has the customer base changed over time? Has the needs of what they want from an organization like you changed? I mean, if we went back and had to think about BlackBerry back in the day, and all of a sudden every senior executive in the world had a BlackBerry, and all of a sudden Apple showed a different way to access similar things in arguably a better and a more simpler way. And all of a sudden, they just didn't shift with the changing customer needs. And by the time they built something that was similar, it was too late. So we need to keep ahead of these trends. They can happen slowly, they can happen quickly, but it's critical to keep abreast of what your customers are thinking about on a daily basis, a yearly basis, and what they're thinking about going forward. So market context is important. You can't write a plan without understanding what the context of the market is, and it actually will really help you focus in on the strategies that will help you most succeed. Thanks for listening.
24-hour business plan.